Project Veritas has confirmed what we already knew about Facebook, and really what we already knew about all of the major social media platforms, namely that they're controlling the flow of information for the sake of their own political and moral agendas. If you're not familiar with Project Veritas, they like to send people undercover to abortion clinics, news organizations, businesses, and so on to find out what's really going on. Things that the organizations would never admit to publicly, but will admit to when they don't know they're being recorded with hidden cameras. Project Veritas just released multiple videos exposing the insane level of bias of the content moderators at Facebook. The emphasis of these videos was on how Facebook employees are trying to influence the election. Let's watch a few clips, and then I'll tell you what I'm more worried about than any upcoming elections.
Facebook's notorious for it, and they say they don't, but it's clear that people's content don't comes up because it's been defiltered off the queue.
It's a very progressive company who's very anti-MAGA.
If you see a conservative post, you just get rid of it, right? Right.
I don't give a I'll delete it.
You gotta do the Cheeto out of office.
I'm thinking, delete like every Donald Trump post I see on the timeline.
Oh, okay, I thought I was the only one.
You think?
Why not? See, this is a man thing.
I thought I was the only one doing that, okay?
You could blaspheme Jesus as much as you want on Facebook. But if you go against somebody that's wearing one of those Islamic hats and thinking that they're going to blow themselves up, well, that's hate speech.
We bring the game to it could work on the left side.
I assume your coworkers were deleting a lot of Trump.
Nobody likes Trump on the Facebook side.
You told me that you just whack all the conservative posts and just gone, right?
Yeah. No, honestly, like every time, half the time when I delete people for pro-Trump, you should be on a watch list, dude.
Yeah. How many of you are like take your own stance and say we're just deleting whatever all the Trump posts?
There's only probably like 16 of us.
And you guys you just delete everyone? Yeah. So
16 in the morning.
So Facebook's like favoring the left with the policy.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And people get banned and blocked.
Project Veritas also interviewed some whistleblowers, people who worked as content moderators for Facebook, but decided to speak out about the political bias.
As someone who was enforcing policy, I saw everybody around me, and I saw myself, and I did a little bit of comparing, and I thought, there really are not very many conservatives here. And because there are not very many conservatives, I really don't think there are very many people sticking up for the voice of conservatives.
There's like 6 people who decide the policy for all of Facebook, and they all think the same. They're very like-minded. So, I mean, if you live in San Francisco, you're not going to find a sample population that's diverse in their political viewpoints.
What percentage of the flagged posts in the civic harassment queue, as it's called, were Republican conservative?
I saw a stark contrast between Republicans versus Democrats in that queue. I saw upwards of 75 to 80% of the posts in that queue were from Republican pages. At a company that handles the flow of conversations, basically a large portion of the discourse online. And we are essentially in charge of what gets said and what gets stifled. And we're deleting, on average, 300 posts, or actioning 300 posts a day. And so if you magnify that by however many content moderators there are on a global scale, that's a lot of stuff that's getting taken down. Well, it's very simple. You've got a formula. You've got a workplace full of mostly liberal-leaning Democrats, leftists, essentially, and they are being put in charge of moderating the entire public discourse. Our voices are in the hands of people who are almost entirely left-leaning and not right-leaning or otherwise unbiased. And in speaking with a lot of them, I found that they are not at all shy to exercise their political will.
Imagine a woman who says that she would gladly kill the President of the United States to save the country, somehow being put in charge of what people are allowed to say on Facebook.
So I remember one individual named Cassie who sat kind of behind me to one side, and we had a few conversations about politics, and in one occasion she, this is during the Iran, a couple of weeks ago, a bounty was placed on Trump's head from Iran. So they offered $80 million to anyone who would kill President Trump. And Cassie was talking about how she would accept that bounty and that it would be, it would be worth it.
She's a content moderator?
Yes.
It's inhumane, but if it's gonna save the country, why not do it? I'm just saying, take him. Y'all can keep your 80 million, or you can give it to us and we can put it in our debt. Like, just you're saving the U.S. Like, come on. Yeah, that's it. They just want one person. Why not take one for the team?
But Facebook can't admit its bias, so the company is forced to live a kind of double life, claiming to be neutral while guiding the course of humanity behind the scenes.
We've seen plenty of statements from Mark Zuckerberg publicly about how they don't want to meddle in the election. They want to give everybody a free, a platform for everybody to speak freely. But we know that privately they have very different opinions, and we've seen that with the previous Facebook story that you guys published. And I had no doubt that what he said publicly is not what he means to do privately.
Now, I don't say much about political parties or politicians until what they're doing crosses over into an area that I deal with on my channel, so there isn't really a situation where these content moderators would block my content for being pro this or that politician. And yet, I got so fed up with Facebook for blocking my content that I'm no longer on that platform, which brings me to my primary concern here. These activists who decide what can and cannot be said on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube don't simply block pro-Trump or anti-Biden content. They block anything they don't like because they were all trained in college to view anything they don't like as hate speech. And all of the platforms encourage their content moderators to block hate speech. If you're posting anything remotely controversial, people flag your content. Everything I post is flagged by people who are trying to get my content blocked. That flagged content goes to the content moderators who are supposed to enforce the community guidelines. But the content moderators are activists who believe that for the good of humanity, they have to silence anyone they disagree with. Do you know who these activist content moderators remind me of? Recently, I made a video titled, "Why Some People Hate Cops, an Ex-Con Explains." I described 5 different kinds of police officers. Some police officers, the worst kind, use their power to harass and control and abuse others. But guess what? You have the same set of personality types wherever there are human beings. When you have the sort of person who will abuse his power, you have to make sure that he isn't put in a position of power. If you put him in a position of power, he's going to abuse that power. Hidden cameras have revealed, and experience shows, that the main social media platforms seem to have a disproportionate number of controlling abusive types on their trust and safety teams. This means that the companies are either stocking their trust and safety teams with people who want to control what other people can say and think, or that the companies are somehow turning people into these controlling abusive types. Either way, what we've got now on these trust and safety teams are a bunch of narcissistic scumbags abusing their authority in a fashion that parallels the way certain police officers abuse their authority. And that, my friends, is why we call them speech police. Let's defund the speech police by exposing them and eventually forcing the tech overlords to fire them.